Hey everyone. In this video, we're going to go through the first 18 questions in the fifth of the Princeton Review Social Studies exams. Now, these were the easy 5 exams. The next book is going to get a bit more difficult because the passages are going to be longer, but there's going to be less knowledge needed to answer the questions. So look at these questions carefully. Think about how we're answering the questions. Think about what to look at in the question and what to look at in the answer, and how to try and remove the wrong answers. That's a really important skill, removing those wrong answers. Good luck, everyone, and let's get going together. So which foundational principle of American government is illustrated in the source above? Popular sovereignty, checks and balances, federalism, or judicial review? Do you know what these words mean? Well, popular sovereignty means that the power is based with the people. Popular is like population. Sovereignty is control. So the control is with the people in the country. Checks and balances is linking to the idea of legislature, executive, and judiciary, where we have a separation of powers. And each branch of government can check the power of the other branches. Federalism is related to the idea of national power and state power. So states have some power over things, the national government have power over different things, and there are some things that both the federal and the state control together. Judicial review is where the court can check the laws and the executive orders made by the president and decide whether they are legal or illegal. The judiciary, the judges, can review the law. Let's look at the passage. An elective despotism was not the government we fought for. So an elected dictator was not what we fought for, but one which should not only be founded on free principles, but in which the powers of government be so divided and balanced among the several bodies of magistracy. Magistracy means just control. So we've got key there. The power of government should be divided, so that no one could transcend their legal limits without being effectually checked and restrained by the others. So no branch of government can go past what their limit is, because there is a balance to them. There is a second part of government that will check what the first part of government is doing. So we're linking to the idea of checks and balances. We're talking about the different powers that are divided into 3 branches, and they are checked and limited by the other branches. So for this reason, the convention which was passed, the orders of government, laid its foundation on the basis that the legislative, executive, and judiciary should be separate and distinct, so that no one person can have power over more than one of them. The president is separate from the legislature. The judges are separate from the president. All of them are individual. All of them can limit the power of the other branch. That's why the correct answer is B. In which of the following ways is the American system of separation of powers different from the structure of a parliamentary system of government? Now, parliamentary system is what we have in Britain, and I think it's what they have in Thailand as well. There is no president, okay? There is a prime minister. Now, in the British system, there is no separate vote for the prime minister. The prime minister is the leader of the biggest party in the legislature. So the executive is also part of the legislature. Now, the judge is the head of state? No, judges are never the head of state. In parliamentary system, all decisions made by the executive are subject to popular referendum. That means people vote on every decision that is made by the leader, by the prime minister. No, it's a representative democracy. People choose representatives to make decisions on their behalf. In the parliamentary system, there is no judiciary. No, there are always judges, there are always courts. But in a parliamentary system, the executive gets its legitimacy from the legislature. This means that the executive is in power because they control the legislature. So the largest party in the legislature forms the executive. and the leader of the largest party becomes the Prime Minister, the head of state. And so this is the correct answer. Number 3. The author of source 1 would have which of the following attitudes towards the situation in source 2? Now, this is one of those difficult questions where you get two sources and you have to compare. So the first thing we have to know is, what does the author of source 1 believe? Secondly, we have to know what is described in source 2, and then we have to compare these two things. So let's look at source 1 first. The alternate domination of one faction means a group, over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension. So we're talking about parties and groups in which different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. So this idea of different parties always trying to get revenge on the other party or undo what the other party did is like a dictatorship. This leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism, dictatorship. So the party system leads to dictatorship. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose, to seek their security in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction of some big party, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. This is saying that if you have party system, then people will care more about their parties, and individuals can become powerful because of their party. But this will ruin the public freedom. So George Washington, you should remember, in his farewell address was warning about the dangers of a party system. George Washington was not the leader of any party. He became the president of America because he had done so much good as the leader during the war against Britain. So he is against political parties. Now, what options do we have? Approval, this is positive. Apathy is like not care. Exuberance means very happy. And dismay means sad. So Thomas Jefferson is writing a letter in 1798, 2 years later. It is now well understood that two political sects have arisen in the United States. Two parties have become dominant in America. One believing the executive is the branch of our government which most needs support. The other, that the analogous branch in the English government, it is ready too strong for the Republican parts of the Constitution. So one party believes the executive, the president, needs more power. The other party believes it's got too much power. There are two different parties here. So the former of these is called the Federalists. Sometimes the aristocrats or the menocrats, and sometimes the Tories, which is the same as the English one. The latter are called the Republicans, Whigs, Jacobins, anarchists, disorganizers. So now there are two parties. So there are two parties. George Washington was against political parties. Jefferson says there are now two parties in America. So if Washington is against parties and there are now two parties in America, he is going to be sad. He's going to be negative about this idea. So the correct answer is dismay. Now, according to source 2, the two main political parties in 1798 disagreed about which of the following. Well, it says one believes the executive is the branch that needs support, the other that the executive is already too strong. So they're disagreeing about the executive. So here we have executive, here we have executive. We don't have executive in the last two answers, so we can take away answer C and answer D. Now, Is this about a power that the executive branch should have, or is it about being separate from the legislative branch? Well, it's about needing support, meaning needing more power, or already too strong, already too powerful. So the correct answer is it's about the amount of power that the executive has. Now, we're asked about the Federalist and the Democrat Republicans. So, the Federalists are the ones that believe there needs to be a strong executive. They believe in a strong federal country where the executive, the president, has more power, more centralized power. The others are the Republicans. Republicans believe that the president is too strong, maybe that the state need more power. So a limited central government, this will be the Republicans. A strong central government will be the Federalists. A national bank, well, this is more power for the nation. So this would be the Federalists. Against the national bank, meaning every state should have their own bank, there should not be a central bank. This would be the Democrat Republicans, who do not want to have strong central government. And then we have strict interpretation of the Constitution and loose interpretation of the Constitution. Now, the Federalists believe the executive needs more support. Okay, so if the executive needs more support, they should be taking more power. Powers that maybe the Constitution do not give them. So they want a loose interpretation of the Constitution so that the president can take more power. On the other hand, the Democrat Republicans want a very strict interpretation of the Constitution so that the president cannot take any additional power. Now we have a map. This map probably shows which of the following. Now, let's look at the dates first. We have Loyalist and Patriot states in 1775, Cotton and non-Cotton states in 1832, Democrat and Free states in 1850, and Free and Slave states in 1861. We can take away this first answer because this area became part of America. This was the Northwest Territory. And this area used to belong to Britain. It became part of America after the War of Independence from Britain, and it was unorganized. It was not separated into different areas. So it's definitely not going to be answer A. Next, look at this one here. This is Oklahoma. This is Texas. And above Texas, we got two new states that were made, and these were Kansas and Nebraska. And Kansas and Nebraska came after the law of 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which said all the citizens that lived in Kansas and Nebraska would be allowed to vote on the issue of slavery. So, because of that, we're going to be looking for an answer that is later in the 19th century. Also, California became a state in 1848. So this idea of 1832 is not possible, because in 1832, this was not a state, Oregon had not joined, and California was not a state either. So the first two answers are too early. You might be tempted by Democrat and Free Soil states in 1850. It's just a little bit before 1854. If you forgot the time of Kansas, Nebraska, you might have chosen that. But the best answer is going to be free and slave states. Look, this area is one color here. And we know that in the South, they had slaves. The North and California and Oregon are a different color. And we know that in the North and the West, there were no slaves. So the best answer is going to be free and slave states in 1861, just before the Civil War began. Key there is looking at what is a state and what is not a state, so you know that you are later, not earlier, and then thinking, well, it shows North and South, and North and South argued a lot over the issue of slavery. So that's why you can guess the answer D, the free and slave states, is going to be the best answer. Now, one of the events that immediately followed the start of the American war in Afghanistan was what? Okay. So, war in Afghanistan started after 9/11. After Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda attacked the Twin Towers in America, well, there was a war in Afghanistan. And the Taliban leaders of Afghanistan were given demands. They wanted to close the Al Qaeda terrorist network. So, this is 2001. Obama became president in 2008. So we can straight away take away answer D. ISIS is a more recent terrorist network. They were there during Obama and later during Donald Trump. They were not during President Bush. So which answer are we going to choose? The opening of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba or the killing of Osama bin Laden? Well, Guantanamo Bay was a detention center. When they arrested people that they thought were terrorists in Afghanistan, they wanted to take them somewhere for questioning. If they took them to America, then the prisoners would have human rights because they would be in America and America believes in following human rights. So they would be able to question them, but they would not be allowed to torture them. The American government under Bush had this very clever little law. They said, if we open a prison that is not in America, that is in a different country, then we don't have to protect them with human rights. So they opened a prison in Cuba, in communist Cuba. And they said, this prison is not part of America, so this prison, the prisoners do not get their human rights. So they would be tortured. For example, they would be waterboarded. Now, waterboarding means you open somebody's mouth and you put a towel over their mouth, and then you start to pour water over the towel. And because the water is constantly coming, the person cannot breathe. It feels like they're drowning. And they would do that again and again and again, hoping the person would give them information. Sometimes they would take all their clothes away and keep them naked. They would put a loud noise in the cell and keep a bright light on 24 hours a day. So the people just could not sleep. The light was so bright, it was like looking at the sun. And the noise was so loud that it plagued their brain. And they would do that for days and days and days to try and disorientate the prisoners. They would sometimes inject chemicals that would cause pain. And this would make the prisoner want to stop the torture, and so they might give them information. The Americans did all these things to the people they captured in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and they did this in a place called Guantanamo Bay, which was opened just after the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. So this is the best answer. Osama bin Laden was killed much later during President Obama's time in office. Now, in source 1 above, what is the most likely explanation for the massive increase in defense spending? Well, look at when it goes up. It goes up between 1917 and 1919. What was happening in the world? Well, 1914 to 1918 was World War I. And America, a little bit late as they were, joined World War I in 1917, after Woodrow Wilson won his second election, after he promised that he would not go and fight. Yeah, well, a few months after he won the election, he decided he would go and fight. So this is about America entering into World War I. America never had colonies in Africa. And America was never invaded. Okay, America was never really invaded, so it wasn't about protecting the United States of America. And the war between the United States and Mexico happened in the 1800s, not in 1917 to 1919. This is one of those questions where if you know your timeline, it's quite easy to infer what happened. This is during World War One. Now, according to source 2, what percentage of the American government spending in 2016 was devoted to healthcare? So very simple. You find healthcare, you go down here, you find healthcare. All you need to write is 28. You don't need to write anything else, just the answer 28. Now, each of the following is responsible for a key component, a key part of establishing the federal budget, except who? Now, this is the legislature. Supreme Court is the judiciary, and the president is the executive. You should know that all bills, all laws about spending money have to begin in the House of Representatives. The Senate also must agree, but they must begin in the House of Representatives. And that's because in the very beginning, the House of Representatives was chosen by the people and the Senate was chosen by the leaders of the state. And so they said if you're taking people's money, then the decision must be made by the representative of the people. So the House of Representatives definitely is involved in making the budget. And the Senate also has to agree, so they are also involved. After they've made this, the law is sent to the president, who needs to sign it. So the president is also involved. The court has no power over the budget. They cannot increase or decrease. They cannot add programs or take programs away. The president could try to change the bill. He could refuse to sign it and say, I want to add this or I want to change that. And then the legislature could either agree or they could just override the president's veto and pass the law anyway. But the legislature and the executive are both involved in making the federal budget. Now, the sentiment expressed by Jane Addams, 1915, in the source above most clearly reflects the aspirations of labor reform means changing the working conditions. The temperance movement means no alcohol. The women's suffrage movement means women's votes. Sexual revolution is about men and women having equality and sex as they like, which happened like 1970s, 1960s. So we can take away answer D. Now, labor reform did happen in the early 1900s. There was laws about child labor, children having to go to school. There were some laws about paying minimum wages, etc. Not many laws, because remember, they had the idea of laissez-faire, that hands-off, where the government didn't make many restrictions on companies. But there were some changes to the law. Now, the amendment banning alcohol happened just after World War I. Also, the amendment giving women the vote also happened just after World War I. And 1915 is just before the end of World War I. So B or C could both be possible. But it says if a woman would fulfill her traditional responsibility to her own children, if she educate and protect from danger factory children who must find their recreation on the street, if she would bring the cultural forces to bear upon our materialistic civilization, and if she would do it all with dignity and directness fitting to one who carries on her immemorial duties, then she must bring herself to use the ballot, the vote. And you could even just look at the title, Why Women Should Vote. This is about women's suffrage. You can get it from the title, Women Voting. You can get it from women and about the ballot box. Quite an easy question, as long as you recognize that suffrage means the right to vote. Now, the debate called the Three-Fifths Compromise, illustrated in the source, concerned which of the following? You should remember this. This was one of those compromises when they were trying to make the Constitution. Different states had different ideas. They were arguing about representation and taxation. So representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned, separated among the several states, which may be included in the Union according to their respective numbers, according to their population, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free people and excluding Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all other people. So it means white plus 3/5 of slaves, and that gives you the population. You should remember that the southern states, they wanted to include the slaves for representation because they wanted to send more representatives to Congress. But they didn't want to include the slaves for taxation because they wanted to pay less tax. The northern states, they wanted to include slaves for both. They allow more Southerners to be represented, but they wanted more taxation. So A is about women being counted equally to men, but this is about free and others. Free means not slave and slave, so it's not about women. Whether and how slaves would be counted for determining a state's population for representation and taxation purposes. This is the correct answer. The appropriate minimum age, it's not about age, it's about the number of people. And the term length for elected representatives is not about how many years they can go to Congress for. It's about how many people are included in a state's population. According to the source above, which of the following regions express the most dramatic increase in very heavy precipitation in the time indicated? So an increase means plus. Here we have minus, so it's not going to be here. We have 5, 12, 16, 11, 33, 27, but here we have 71%. So this is north, this is east. So it's the northeast region. This question just needs you to use a little bit of your own knowledge. Which of the following, or each of the following, is a threat to humans posed by an increase in heavy precipitation, that means heavy rain, except what? So which of these is not a threat to humans? Earthquakes, flooding, landslides, or crop damage. Now, all of these things can hurt people, but not all of these are caused by a lot of rain. Crop damage, well, if there's too much rain, you probably know from current state, if there's too much rain, the seeds get washed away. So this can damage, this can threaten people's livelihoods. Landslides. If there's a lot of rain, then loose mud on a mountain can start to fall down. I think we see it on the Mirawaddy Road sometimes in rainy season. There are landslides. Mud falls down the mountain and blocks the roads. This could be a danger. It could fall on people. Flooding. Well, if there's more rain, there's more water, the river will rise and it will flood into people's houses. But earthquakes are not caused by rain. Earthquakes are caused by tectonic plates moving past each other and causing pressure and making the ground shake. That's not due to rain. So the correct answer is A, earthquakes. Now, question 15. The law that best exemplifies Lyndon Johnson's Great Society is what? The Sherman Antitrust Act. This was very early in the 20th century. Antitrust meant no monopoly. So this was about economics. The Interstate Commerce Act is about trade. Civil Rights Act is about people's rights. Endangered Species Act is about animals. So is it about trade, people's rights, or animals? So the purpose of protecting the life of our nation and preserving the liberty of our citizens, about people, is to pursue the happiness of our people. The success in that pursuit is the test of our success as a nation. For a century, we labored to settle and to subdue a continent. For half a century, we called upon the unbound invention and untiring industry to create an order of plenty for all our people. The challenge of the next half century is whether we have the wisdom to use that wealth to enrich and increase our national life and to advance the quality of our American civilization. We're talking about people. We're talking about society. Okay? Not only about a rich society and a powerful society, but an upward society where there is liberty, where there is freedom for all, an end to poverty and racial injustice. This is about civil rights. It's not about trade, it's about people's rights, about people's living conditions. Now, we've got some very long sources here, but the question is a little bit simple. The word compensation in source 1 would best be replaced by which of the following? Concealment means to hide. Penalty means to punish. Contract means to get smaller, or agreement. And a salary is money that you are paid for your job. So the president shall at stated times receive for his service, for his work, a compensation, which shall not increase or be diminished, get smaller. So because he is serving, he shall get a compensation. Because he's serving, he shall get a salary. So the best answer is salary. Who was the only American president to be impeached in the 20th century? Okay, this is knowledge question. You probably didn't get this one correct. Now, Johnson was impeached after the Civil War, but that was the 19th century. Nixon was going to be impeached, but he resigned first. And then his successor, Gerald Ford, gave him a full pardon, a full forgiveness. The only president that got impeached was Bill Clinton. And Clinton was impeached for perjury. That means lying before a jury. And for obstruction of justice, for making it hard for the police to do their job. He lied about having sex with one of his interns, with one of his workers. And because he lied about having sex, he was put on trial in the Senate. But he was found not guilty, and he was able to continue to be president. So, which of these actions are constitutional? Which of these actions are unconstitutional? Which of these actions break the Constitution? We probably need to use source 2 and our own knowledge. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be an oath of affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. He shall be the chairperson. And no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members. So an impeachment where 3/4 agree is okay. 3/4 is bigger than 2/3. So this is constitutional. It also says that the Chief Justice shall preside if the president is being impeached. Now, you can impeach a judge or a Secretary of State, But if it is the president that is being impeached, it must be the Chief Justice that is the leader. Here it says the Speaker of the House is presiding. So this would be against the Constitution. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than the removal from office. So the punishment for somebody that is found guilty in an impeachment trial shall be removal from office and the disqualification to have any office in the future. Here it says the prison sentence is the result of the impeachment. This would also be not constitutional. The Constitution says the only punishment that is available is to remove them from office. You cannot send them to prison or ask for any money. So that was based on source 2. Let's look at source 1. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the Constitution being adopted shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible that has not attained the age of 35 and been 14 years a resident in the United States. Now it says 37. 37 is more than 35, so that's okay. But here it says living in the United States for 9 years. Here it stays living in the United States for 14 years. So this would be not constitutional. Let's continue. In the case of the removal of the president from office, or he dies, or he's resigned, or he cannot do his job anymore, then the office shall devolve on the vice president. If the president is removed for any reason, then the vice president shall become the president. So the vice president becomes the president after the president's death. This is what the Constitution says. So this is constitutional. Remember, constitutional means follows the Constitution. Unconstitutional means breaks the Constitution. Well, that's the end of the first part of the explanation for this exam. Hopefully this has been useful. It's really good. I like this exam because there's lots more reading to do. And this is perhaps more similar to what the real exam is going to look like. Also, la sai